What is up? Welcome in to No Pun Intended, presented by Club Fantasy. I'm your host again this week, Ryan Weiss. I know you're disappointed, especially after the tremendous amount of flubs on the last time I hosted, but I also forgot to confirm if we had a host this week, and Hutch never DM'd me back, so I'll blame him, but it's basically all my fault. But I promise you, it's still going to be a good show, even though you have to hear me, because our guest is that fantastic. We have on the show my good buddy, Nate Hamilton, the newest full-time editor at thegamblinggroup.com. Nate has been a pillar of this industry for many years, and now we get to talk with him as a full-time analyst. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. And because I know Nate, we have a very good show lined up. We are covering the Raiders, the Cardinals, and Nate's Dallas Cowboys. Stick with us. It's going to be a fun one. Second time's a charm. That went way better this time. As I said, welcome in, everybody. It is No Pun Intended, presented by Club Fantasy. I am Ryan Weiss. With me, as always, the founder of Club Fantasy, my good buddy, Josh Hudson. We are a week removed from talking the Eagles, and now we got to talk the Cowboys. Your second favorite team to talk about, right?
Right? Well, we'll say my favorite team to trash. So
I was going to say, and Josh immediately.
I do love talking about them, mostly because it's negative, but that's okay. So,
this has become a
fantasy, and let's be honest, this is a good team to talk about for fantasy.
And it's become a yearly tradition that during this show, you take a look at my Cowboys projections and tell me that I'm way too high on the Cowboys. And so, but as I mentioned, the guest tonight makes the show, my great buddy, Nate Hamilton. And the reason you guys may not know this is the perfect show to have Nate on is we're covering the Arizona Cardinals with DeAndre Hopkins, one of Nate's favorite players. We're covering the Las Vegas Raiders with Davante Adams, one of Nate's favorite players. And we're covering Nate's Dallas Cowboys. So, Nate, you're welcome. I don't even know if you had to do any research for this show.
It was meant to be, man. It was awesome. And I appreciate the intro, Ryan. You know, coming from you, buddy, we're good friends. And I just appreciate when you say such great things about me and make me sound so much better than I am. So thank you so much for that.
For those that don't know, Nate and I started basically our Twitter accounts right around the exact same time, our own little websites around the exact same time. And then we were both brought on as one of the original 10 fantasy football's writers. We basically both left the Ballers around the exact same time.
Unbelievable, dude.
I was going to say, and now Nate is full-time and I'm a stay-at-home dad. I do full-time fantasy. I just don't get the fat paychecks that Nate's pulling in over there.
So now what we need is, Nate, we need you to teach Ryan how to Twitter because he's only got about a third of the followers that you do. So
no, Ryan does not need any help there. He does very well on Twitter.
I was going to say, let's be clear. I also have with 0% of the shit that Nate catches on Twitter half of the time. So he can have those other 10,000 or whatever he has me beat by.
It's a burden for sure.
You handle it so well, though.
Thank you.
So we're going to start with the Raiders. We are going to start with Davante Adams switching teams in the middle of this offseason and kind of starting the ball rolling and all of the chaos. Last year, they were 10-7. They do have a new coach. If you were under a rock last year, some things went down with John Gruden, some emails he's probably not proud of. But now Josh McDaniels gets his third try at being an NFL coach.
Second.
Though. Well, technically, he was supposed to be with what was it, the Colts, where he quit before he actually took the job. So that was the joke I was trying to make. Thanks, Josh. Nice. And then the new offensive coordinator is Mick Lombardi. So as you know, if you've been following along with the show, Josh and I will break down our players with the most fantasy upside, least fantasy upside. For Josh, most fantasy upside, he has Josh Jacobs. I have Derek Carr, the player with the biggest trap. Essentially, we just don't trust these guys, especially at their current ADP. Josh has at ADP Darren Waller. I have Nate's Davante Adams, but I'm sure he's going to tell me why I'm wrong. So we're going to start with questions for Nate, and I'm sure we'll talk about many more Raiders as the show goes on. But Nate, if there is one Raider you need to leave fantasy drafts with, who's that going to be?
Derek Carr. Believe it or not. The dude finished as the quarterback 14 last season on the back of Hunter Renfrow, a broken Darren Waller, and guess what his ADP is this year?
QB 14.
QB 14. Nothing's changed. The addition of Davante Adams should have bumped him up a few spots at least. You know, where he finished in 2021 is just a baseline of what he can do with Davante Adams, right? So he had 8 games with double-digit touchdowns. And that's something that Davante Adams can step in and do on his own on a weekly basis. So it's unbelievable that his price hasn't changed, even though he got the best wide receiver in the game. So give me Derek Carr, please.
And that's a pattern I'm starting to notice a lot this offseason is the quarterback. It seems to be the cheapest piece of a lot of these offenses. So if you want a piece of Davante Adams and you want a piece of Darren Waller and you want a piece of Hunter Renfrow, because you should, Derek Carr is your entry point. And you have Josh McDaniels, who's worked with some very prolific quarterback in the past, Tom Brady. And so obviously you would expect improvement on Carr's part just by working with McDaniel. Josh, or should we expect first year growing pains, or is this something where their weapons are in place and they're just going to come out firing?
I personally don't have any issues with how Carr is going to transition in this offense. The one thing that we've seen in a McDaniel's offense, it operates very well on quick passing and accurate passing. And that's something that Derek Carr does very well. This is why, if you're drafting in Scott Fishbowl, why Derek Carr is so valuable in that format, because it rewards quarterbacks with higher completion percentages. And that is Derek Carr. Now you give him a true wide receiver 1 who is not afraid to catch touchdown passes, mind you. And the sky is the limit for Derek Carr. Like, I went through and I did my projections, and Ryan, you and I were talking, I think it was last week, about this. I honestly think that this Raiders team could end up leading the NFL in total plays this year. Like, they have a strong running game. McDaniels comes from a system. I mean, the last couple of years, they've been easily top 5, top 3 in the league in total rushing attempts. They will run the football. And they have a guy behind them in Josh Jacobs who can run the football, especially given an offensive line that creates holes for him. And that's a scheme that McDaniels can implement even with subpar offensive linemen. So they've added other pieces. Hunter Renfrow burst on the scene last year. You still have Darren Waller. This team could easily have 3 guys over 100 targets and 2 running backs over 150 carries.
Kenny Drake, pass catcher.
Exactly.
So, he's got weapons galore. It's I don't know. It's one of those, have no idea. I'm going to have a bunch of Derek Carr this season.
Yeah. So my biggest thing is, how many touchdown passes will he throw? That's my biggest thing. Darren Waller's never really yeah. No, Darren Waller's never really been a high touchdown guy, and that's kind of what I was getting at when I said a wide receiver 1 that can catch touchdowns.
Yeah.
So how many runs are they going to have inside the 5? Those are going to be Jacobs touchdowns. But we know that Davante Adams knows how to get open in the red zone. Hunter Renfrow, dude can shake anybody, and he finds a way to get open. So, he could very easily have 20 touchdown passes just between Adams and Renfrow. Right. And then it becomes, where does everybody else come in? I haven't personally statted out for 32, but I could easily see a scenario where he hits 40.
Wow, 32. I really I have him at 30, so we're pretty fair there. Before we move on from Carr, we love to play Would You Rather. It's a game we invented here, but there's actually only one player I would you rather with this. And I'm going to start with you, Nate. Do we want, because when you're looking at Derek Carr, most fantasy leagues out there are 12-team leagues. And let's assume you punted the quarterback. I feel like when I'm in drafts with analysts, a lot of times the analyst is the last person to take a quarterback in the draft. I know I'm almost always the last quarterback to take the person to take a quarterback. There are 2 players that could be your last quarterback. Davante Adams' current quarterback, Derek Carr, and Davante Adams' old quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, who I know you had an affinity for, but I don't know if that was more about Davante Adams. So right now, you're the last person in your draft to take a quarterback. Rodgers and Carr looking at you. Which one are you taking?
I'm taking the guy with Davante Adams. That's just, I love Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, he's MVP caliber. And if he can bring the Packers into the playoffs this year without Davante, then he's probably going to win his 3rd consecutive MVP. So, but that said, I just like the weapons that Derek Carr has so much more than what Aaron Rodgers has this year. And so I'm going to go with that.
Makes perfect sense. Josh?
I hate to say it, but I think I'm agreeing with Nate here. I would take Derek Carr, and it's not because I think Rodgers is a worse quarterback. I mean, Derek Carr has been shit on for way too long. He's a quality starting quarterback. And we see a lot of times in the NFL when quality starting quarterbacks, maybe not great starting quarterbacks, but when quality starting quarterbacks get elite weapons, they're able to take that step. Just look at Kirk Cousins getting Justin Jefferson. He became a much better quarterback after getting Justin Jefferson. So I don't see why Carr can't elevate himself into this conversation because he has an elite playmaker in Davante Adams. That being said, we've seen average Aaron Rodgers only throw 27 touchdown passes.
Yeah.
He doesn't have any great weapons. So why are we going to just peg him in for 30 plus touchdowns this year?
Right.
Like, I could very easily see him taking a step back especially from a fantasy perspective.
You brought up Kirk Cousins, and I am a man of the people, and our buddy Albert is wondering, we got to throw one more in here. Same situation. Kirk Cousins with Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, KJ Osborne, Derek Carr with Davante Adams, Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller. Who are we taking? Same exact situation. Josh, I'll start with you since you brought him up.
Oh, God, this hurts. I think I'm going to go Cousins. That's just my gut reaction. I've statted both of those guys out, and let me see where I currently have them.
I say they're very close to each other in mine, and even when we just did
they're separated by 0.15 fantasy points in Scott Fishbowl scoring for me. Literally. And I have Carr at the plus 0.15. So I guess by default, I'll go Derek Carr. Now I kind of want to change the scoring just to see how that works out.
Nate, how's it shake out for you?
Kirk Cousins has been one of my favorite late round QBs for the last, 4 seasons at least. So that's a tough one. Again, yes, Justin Jefferson, one of my favorite wide receivers, also now in the NFL. So it does make it a little tougher. But again, I cannot, until Davante Adams, until his wheels fall off, I'm going with whoever's around him, because I think that he just elevates everybody, so much more, especially the quarterback position, because that's where he's going to make a lot of his money. So give me Derek Carr still.
Absolutely, I love it. And if you take nothing else from this, it's something that I preach on my Mock Draft Monday show every week, and it's something that hopefully just opened your eyes here with Derek Carr, Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins going essentially free in fantasy drafts. If you are the person who waits on your quarterback, wait on your damn quarterback. There is no reason to draft these guys high. There are all-stars waiting at the 12th, 13th round of your draft, and you don't need to waste a 5th round pick on Josh Allen. Josh Allen is fantastic, but the point difference is not worth what you're giving up at running back, wide receiver, things like that. And sometimes
for what it's worth in standard QB scoring now, and when I say standard, I mean our standard, which is 6 points per passing touchdown. I do have Cousins 15 points higher than Carr. And a lot of that is because I have him throwing 2 more touchdowns. But Justin Jefferson is he's a higher yards per reception receiver than Davante Adams. And I think that ultimately kind of lends a little more towards Cousins' side, but I don't really.
We're splitting hairs. I mean, it's exactly at the end of the season. It's probably going to be a separation of 10 points between the two.
Yeah. The lesson is don't draft,
which is less than a point per game.
Yeah.
So Nate, if there's a Raider you're avoiding in drafts.
Oh boy, Darren Waller.
Okay.
Because you have to spend a 4th round on a tight end, and I just like quarterback, I will punt on tight end. I'll wait on tight ends. Carr obviously has developed chemistry with Hunter Renfrow last year. Now has the best wide receiver in the game. Obviously the addition of Davante Adams, I think, hurts Waller, because to Josh's point, Waller wasn't even catching touchdowns prior to Davante Adams getting there. There's no way he's getting those looks, in the end zone with Davante Adams there. So Waller did miss some time last year with knee, back injuries. He went on the COVID list for a couple. So, but he wasn't very effective in the majority of his games. Foster Monroe, the other tight end, actually showed a little bit of potential as a pass catcher in Waller's absence. So maybe he even sees an increase in his target share this season. So I just don't like Waller's ADP. I think it should have taken more of a hit this season than it has. So I'm gonna pass on him.
And there's a lesson to be learned. Josh McDaniels is not afraid to use 2 tight ends. And so Waller and Monroe could eat into each other without even factoring in what Davante Adams is going to do.
Yeah.
Now, Josh, I'm going to get to you because I know you said the same thing about Waller. For me, I put Adams as the trap play, and it's only because of how high the ADP is without knowing what the targets are going to shake out. And it's the same reason you guys don't like Waller, but I understand I'm just lower on Adams than most. And when I say lower, I'm talking like 2 or 3 spots, but to get Adams right now, you have to pay up for him. So Josh, do you have anything to add on why it's Waller as the trap for you?
No, Nate kind of hit it. When I was going through and doing my projections, the one like Patriots year that McDaniels was calling plays that really stood out as like a pretty fair comparison for me was the 2014 Patriots, where they had Edelman and Gronk both over 130 targets, and then Brandon LaFell as like the X receiver at like 114, I believe. So like there's precedent for this style of offense to throw 600 plus times and have 3 guys over 100 targets. But again, do they run 500 plus times? If they do, then some of these targets are coming down. Can Waller stay healthy? Like it's one of those things where, and I've talked about this in reference to James Conner. Like when you have things in your past that kind of eat away at your health, like, Conner having cancer, like it's not a bad thing that he's recovered from it, but it takes a toll on your body in the long run. Kind of the similar situation with Darren Waller and his previous drug use. Like, we want to celebrate him for overcoming it, but it takes a toll on your body over the long haul. And, we saw the injuries kind of start to take its toll last year. Will that continue? I would like to think that it doesn't, but I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a biologist or anatomy person or whatever the hell the term is. Like, I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't know how much of that target share. What I do know is that you don't swing and trade for Davante Adams and give him a 5-year, almost $150 million contract to say, I'm not going to throw the ball to you 10 times a game. Like, I just don't see that. So that's why I think that he's a bigger trap, especially at ADP, because just like Nate said, you're paying up to a 4th round pick for him. I'm all for getting a high-end tight end early. Ryan, you and I talk about this all the time. Get the guy that's going to separate you at that position. But I think of those top 5 guys that are going in the 4th round, to me, Waller is the biggest trap, literally for this reason.
Completely agree. And Waller fell to my tight end 6 behind a guy we're going to talk about later. So I'll save that for later because there is at least one player on the show I'm just going to gush about the entire time. And then Josh always does the third question to cater to our guest. And so I'm going to be interested to see how Nate answers this. So Nate, if you had to gamble on a player being the best fantasy asset at their position, who would it be? And so what I think, Josh, do you want to explain exactly what you're asking? Because sometimes
exactly. So when you're looking at ADP, when you're looking at positional value, what's the guy that you think, all right, I'm going to roll the dice here because it's going to be a high payoff?
Okay. I don't think this is actually rolling the dice, so maybe I'm not meeting the criteria, but I'm going to say Hunter Renfrow.
Well, I was going to say, even odds still makes you money, just not as much money.
well, Hunter Renfrow, his ADP currently right now is the wide receiver 26, so you can get him in about the 6th round, right? So look, he's not going to give you the wide receiver 10 numbers he gave you last season, obviously. But I can argue having Davante Adams opens things up for Renfrow this year. Renfrow was the only target for Carr a good portion of last season, and defenses still couldn't handle him. So give me some Hunter Renfrow. If I miss out on Davante Adams, I want that late value of Hunter Renfrow, especially given, the chemistry that, him and Carr have shown last season. So I think if we're talking ADP and value, I think we're going to get value out of Hunter Renfrow.
And you're going to get no arguments on this show. And Josh, you and I should both be happy that Joe Zolo is not with us this week.
He would spend 6 minutes just agreeing with Nate.
Exactly. But I'm going to do what Joe would like to do, and that is put us on the spot. So if you have not followed along with this show for a while, we do a end of the season sort of liability show, accountability show is what I'm looking for. And Josh and I were pretty notoriously bad on Hunter Renfrow last year. Like both had him outside of wide receiver 60, maybe both outside of wide receiver 70 in our preseason rankings. So Josh, we're going to do it right now. So wide receiver 10 last year, as Nate said, he's unlikely to repeat. You said his ADP right now, Nate, is wide receiver
26. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
26.
This is PPR. This is PPR.
Yeah,
okay.
Fantasy Pros has him at wide receiver 30, so I don't know if you're looking at a specific.
That's fair.
No, I'm looking at Fantasy Football Calculator.
Okay, so Josh, where do you have Hunter Renfrow in your projections as of right now?
Considering I don't have them 100% complete. I currently have him.
Well, let me ask you this:
I have him at 224.81 fantasy points. So I have him as of right now, and again, I haven't statted out like I think 13 teams.
You said 224 is where you have him?
224.81. So I currently have him above Jalen Waddle and Amon-Ra St. Brown, but just under Keenan Allen and Terry McLaurin.
Okay. In my rankings, I have him at 210, so we're not very far off. He fell as wide receiver 27 in my rankings, and your 224 would put him as wide receiver 22. So let's see if he makes us look stupid again this year. But hey, we've put it out there publicly. We fucked up last year. We're trying to do better this year.
Once I finish my projections, I will more than happily make a tweet in celebration of Hunter Renfrow and put it out where I currently have him ranked, because I'm not whiffing this year.
There we go. Before we move on from the Raiders, we're going to deal with Joe went ahead and did the show sheet for us. His biggest sleeper, and Nate kind of already hit on this, Foster Moreau, and it's exactly what Joe put in here. If Vegas adapts to the 2 tight end set with Josh McDaniels, Moreau is going to be a beast this year, and he's currently not even listed on ADP. He's not being drafted.
So here you go.
ADP. He's
Foster
free.
Moreau or Jonnu Smith. Go.
He's free.
That was the fun question last week. I would go Foster Moreau. Nate, Foster Moreau or Jonnu Smith?
Foster Moreau.
Josh, I imagine it's
Foster
the same.
Moreau.
Yeah, exactly. And then for the IDP stash, not much of a stash, but Joe has Chandler Jones in there. Jones coming over from Arizona. He's now going to be playing opposite of Max Crosby, and he's going to be an absolute beast this season. Speaking of the Arizona Cardinals, last year they went 11-6. Same head coach, same offensive coordinator because they don't have an offensive coordinator. Cliff Kingsbury calls all the plays. Player with the most fantasy upside. Josh has Keontae Ingram. I have James Conner. Player who is the biggest trap. Josh has DeAndre Hopkins. I have Zach Ertz. And as always, we are going to start with the guests. Nate, if there is one Arizona Cardinal that you are leaving your fantasy draft with, that is?
I agree with you, Ryan. It's James Conner. I mean, I've been a Conner supporter since day one heading into last season. So I tweeted this on April 13th. Let me see if I can pull it up. So it said, Kenyon Drake had a career high in rush attempts with the Cardinals in 2020. I said, James Conner could have a very similar season in 2021. His early 2021 fantasy consensus appears to be down, which it was. I believe he'll return his draft value regardless of ADP. Got a lot of hate for saying that stuff, but where did he finish? He just finished 13 carries shy of his career high with 202 carries, and he finished as the RB5. Yeah. His ADP in 2021, RB40. What are we doing? Like, what is happening here? 12 spots behind. Oh, I'm sorry. That was his ADP in 2020.
Last year. Yeah,
that was last year. But that was 12 spots behind the almighty Chase Edmonds that everyone wanted to don.
I was going to say they saddled the wrong horse last year.
They really did. And, I said, we will see a reduction in tight ends most likely. Yes, because he had 15 last year. Yep. But the Cardinals removed Chase Edmonds, who had 116 carries from the equation, showing that Conner is their guy. He's the RB19. In ADP this year.
I love it.
So give me James Conner all day, every day.
Nate and I clearly look at fantasy very similarly, which makes it a pain in the ass with the amount of leagues I end up doing with him every year. But that was my biggest thing with James Conner is the RB5 last year loses competition for touches. And we're like, we're not going to draft him until the third or fourth round of fantasy.
And he just got a contract extension.
But I'm going to give Josh a little credit with James Conner as well, because one of the things Josh does far better than I do is Josh studies offensive lines and he studies play calling. And Josh, you said last year that you got tired of watching Kenyon Drake run into the back of his offensive lineman. And what the Cardinals needed was somebody who could run between the guard and the center. And when they brought in James Conner, we 100% were in agreement that James Conner was a guy who could run in between the guard and the center. And what do you know? He scores 18 touchdowns, 15 on the ground. So Josh, I know you're not exactly high on Conner this year, but you certainly called last year.
It's not that I'm not high on Conner. I think his ADP is 1,000% fine. He can very easily outplay that. My biggest issue is when you saw Chase Edmonds go down last year and James Conner had to be the lead back and literally have to play 90+% of the snaps, he starts to wear down. And again, it's the same thing that I was just talking about with Darren Waller.
Yeah.
You know, this guy came back from cancer. Like, that takes its toll on you. And that's why even that one big year that he had in Pittsburgh, he fell towards the end of the year because he was just having too big of a workload. And I feel like that he's a guy that can do it for a game or two here and there. But when you try to string together 3, 4, 5 straight games where he's 85-90% of the touches, it starts to weigh on him, and that yards per carry just steadily starts to go down because, again, the Cardinals don't have a great offensive line. It's just Kingsbury's stubborn, and he's going to run the plays that he runs, and it really doesn't matter. But Connor's a guy that can break through in short yardage, and it works. He's a talented pass catcher. But I think this is why they went out and got Keontae Ingram, because Ingram can catch the football.
Yeah.
If I told you that he had almost a 93% catch rate in college, how many targets do you think he had in 4 years in college?
For a 93% catch rate, I would imagine not over 40.
97 career targets.
Wow.
And 92.8% catch percentage. He had 90 catches on 97 targets. This is a guy that can catch.
That's
the
good.
Football.
Why wasn't he more involved? What's wrong with the analytics?
I don't know, but he fell to the 6th round. So everybody in fantasy is like, whatever. Draft capital's not there. We're just going to bypass him. But he's competing with Eno Benjamin and Darrell Williams, who was signed after the NFL draft.
Yeah.
Like, Darrell Williams was okay in Kansas City. Wasn't great. Wasn't anything special. Like, if Keontae Ingram comes in and proves that he can be an asset on third down as both a pass blocker and a pass catcher, they're going to find ways to give James Conner rest. And Chase Edmonds over the last 2 years averaged 4.3 targets per game. That's going to have some value for Ingram, which is why I like him as an upside play, because he's going at RB 70 something right now. And that'll cut away some of those targets that Conner had last year. And I feel like his target share was elevated because Edmonds missed those 4 games. So, but you take that away, he's basically Damian Harris. And I feel like his ADP then fits a little bit better in the scheme of RB2 range.
Now, the one thing I like about Conner, and I don't have any stats to support this, but typically when I say what I'm about to say, I'm right. The one thing I like about Conner is that
the most humble man in America, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, exactly. When you have wide receivers like DeAndre Hopkins, and now you have speedy wide receivers like Marquise Brown, they draw pass interference, and pass interference doesn't score wide receivers any touchdowns, but man, does it put that ball inside of the 5-yard line. And Conner had 19 carries inside of the 5 last year and scored 10 touchdowns on those carries inside of the 5-yard line. So these are the types of things where you can expect touchdown regression just because he scored so many, but it may not fall as far as you think it's going to fall because this offense is set up.
If you told me there was a world where he scores 20 touchdowns, I'd believe you. If there is a world that he scores only 10, I'd still believe you. Like, that is literally his range of outcomes.
Yeah.
Like double digit for sure. I think he's locked in for it. And the truth is that, he might get, fewer carries this season. Who knows? I don't think he's going to get fewer carries. If anything, he'll get fewer targets, like you were mentioning.
I agree.
But he'll increase his carries. But I think he could actually become more efficient in this offense now that he's got a solidified role, and they don't need the run game necessarily to get this offense moving. So to Ryan's point, pass interference calls gets them on that half goal line. and
James
Connor's
Conner
easy
walks into the
touchdown.
end zone.
Easy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and keep in mind, too, in the second half of this season, he's going to be the starting running back with DeAndre Hopkins, Marquise Brown, and Zach Ertz in 3 wide sets.
Yep.
He's going to have all day to run. There's going to be no defenders in front of him. Like,
and if you believe in
this
the
is a guy
Rondale
that I
Moore
want to
step-up.
trade for midseason.
Yeah.
Because he's going to ball in the fantasy playoffs.
Good call.
So do you think that it could be something where he starts slowly and he's an acquire after September?
I don't know that he'll start slowly because I think that he'll still be more involved in the passing game early. Because again, it's going to take some time for Ingram to kind of, get the feel of the game and the offense. And even if he seizes that opportunity, because I feel like they'll probably start with Williams in that role, but they're going to give these guys every opportunity to see who shakes out in which way behind Connor in the preseason.
Okay.
So
Love it. So Nate, if there's a Cardinal you're avoiding, do you have one?
I'm gonna make this quick, guys, because it pains me to even say this. DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, he suffered a torn MCL last year. The risk is just too great, especially with his suspension looming. He's trying to, get it knocked down a little bit, but right now it stands at 6 weeks for PEDs. But he's still being drafted as a top 20 wide receiver right now.
Okay. It's far lower on Fantasy Pros. I just want to throw that out there because I have a
so
counterpoint
Fantasy
to
Pros
this,
is very different from
Calculator.
So Fantasy Pros
all this is
averages
doing
out
is
like
enforcing-
ESPN, Rotosports, Fantrax, Calculator, Sleeper.
I use Fantasy Football Calculator, and so Fantasy Pros sounds like it's where do they have them on Fantasy Pros?
34, and
So
and
just
FF
enforcing
Calculator
that
is
point.
by far the highest. So.
I should have gone by Fantasy Pros because it just makes my points even puts the
There's a
exclamation
player
point
I
on
want
it.
to talk about with this though, because Josh, I know you want to agree with Hopkins, and I'm going to let you. But there's an interesting thing I've discovered, and some news has kind of changed this a little bit. But I feel like DeAndre Hopkins is kind of fair at wide receiver 34, especially in maybe 10-team leagues, because he's your wide receiver 4 in that situation, and you can wait on him. Chris Godwin is facing almost the exact same situation as DeAndre Hopkins and could very well start the season on the pup, but is going off the board according to Fantasy Pros as the wide receiver 21. And it's a big, interesting gap in between their value because they're facing the exact same situation. Hurt knees, missing the first 6 games of the season, but we are paying damn near high-end wide receiver 2 prices for Chris Godwin, whereas for DeAndre Hopkins, we're letting him fall almost all the way down to wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. So, but Nate, to your point, FF Calculator is the highest of all of the things that Fantasy Pros is weighing.
But I'll say this, though. If the suspension holds, you're talking about half of the fantasy football season, right? So if you can somehow place him on IR, then fine. But if you can't, you're taking up a bench spot. I get it. Trust me. DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson is now on the bandwagon for my favorite all-time receivers. Love these guys. But even with him, it's like, how long is it going to take him to get reacclimated with this offense, especially with the new weapons they have now? And he's coming off of that injury. He's got a lot more time to heal from it, of course, with a suspension, but that's just a lot of zeros you're taking from a guy, even if you're drafting him in, as a wide receiver 3.
Yeah. Josh, did we steal all your points? Do you have anything to throw in there?
No, I mean, really, my biggest one is if he misses the first 6 of the year with the suspension, like if he doesn't get it delayed or pushed back, etc., that gives Kyler Murray and Hollywood Brown 6 weeks to get reacclimated with each other.
Yes, sir.
So when Hopkins comes back, why would Kyler then start to try to force feed Hopkins when he already has this rapport with Hollywood?
And even
let's keep in mind too, he developed a pretty good rapport with Zach Ertz as well last year, closing out. So this is just, to me, it's an offense that's not going to throw, 620 some odd times. I just don't see that. And unless Kyler just completely stops running altogether, in which case, why are we drafting him so high?
Right.
If that's the case. So it's one of those things where I can fully see a scenario when Hopkins comes back and he's maybe seeing 5 targets a game. That's not a wide receiver 3 to me.
That's rough. DeAndre Hopkins at 5 targets a game is also
and
not
that's the point I'm getting at. Like, because Hopkins is an 8+ target a game guy.
Yeah. Right.
And, maybe Hollywood is only a 6 or 7, but Zach Ertz has been a 7-8 target per game tight end as well throughout most of his career. And he proved last year that he can still do it.
So my concern with Zach Ertz,
one of these guys is getting hurt, that now you've got Rondale Moore too that's supposed to be running out of the slot. Yeah. There's way too many mouths to feed in this offense.
And that's just to go back quickly, because I have Ertz down as my biggest trap. And part of that is I notoriously hate mid-tier tight ends. I just feel like they always end up being a trap. You either want a really good one or stream the damn position. But Ertz also kind of had the tight end room to himself last year. Max Williams, who was playing very well before he got hurt, is back. And then they draft Trey McBride, who was the best tight end in the college draft coming out. So I'm worried about if Ertz is going to be able to continue what he was doing, but he's still going to see some targets. And that illustrates your point that we're running into a situation where it's too many mouths to feed. And whereas we know Devontae Adams is going to get his, we don't necessarily know anybody on this offense is going to get theirs, but for 6 weeks, it's the Kyler and Hollywood show. And it's going to be very interesting to see if they move away from that. Nate, who would you say, we're back to the gambling, so who would you bet on to end up outplaying their ADP being the best fantasy asset from the Arizona Cardinals?
It's a perfect segue because you just mentioned his name. It's Marquise Brown. He's the wide receiver 31, which you can get him in the 7th round. It might be even higher or lower than that.
Other way with them. He's 22. Fantasy calculator is the worst on Marquise Brown. So
unbelievable. These ADPs.
But this is actually something I adore doing. So I'm going to let you talk about Hollywood, but I just want to throw one quick thing out. These are the kind of discrepancies you want to look for. Yes. Because if you're finding something, if you're playing in a league where Hollywood Brown's ADP is wide receiver 31 and smart people like Nate are about to tell you he's going to outplay that ADP. And then even if you go to a website and see that he should be the wide receiver 22, he is a value, and that is someone you want on your fantasy team. So Nate, please continue.
Amen. So, obviously Kyler Murray, he's got a new vertical toy target. Mm-hmm. And I believe he takes advantage of the missed time by DeAndre Hopkins, as Josh alluded to earlier. He's a great fit for Murray in this offense. He can win you a fantasy matchup with one catch. Like, that is the impact Marquise Brown can have.
Or he can call one with one drop.
Or 3 drops.
That's true. That is also true. But you want to know what, though? Where you're drafting him, he's worth the risk, right? So
it's fair.
Brown scored.
Sorry, I just had to get a knock in.
That's fine. But it's fair, though. It's fair. But the truth is, with a lot of and he was one of the top targeted wide receivers last year. So usually when that happens, the efficiency numbers start kind of going astray a bit because you're just getting so many targets. So that's fine. It's going to happen. What I wanted to say is that Brown scored 6 touchdowns in his first 7 games last year, but didn't score a single touchdown the rest of the season. And I think that had to do more with the Ravens offense than it did Brown's ability. Lamar Jackson threw more than 1 touchdown in just 2 games last season. I had to check this stat like 6,000 times.
I think last year was like by far his worst passing touchdown year.
I cannot even believe it. So for me, and Lamar Jackson, backers are going to hate me for saying this. Kyler Murray is no doubt an upgrade for Marquise Brown this year. So he's the guy I'm going after.
And it makes a ton of sense. Now, Josh, I want to just quickly, before we move into Joe's thing and move on from the team, you brought up, what if Kyler doesn't run again? And why are we drafting him as high? And you and I have actually discussed this, I think, once a month. We bring up, like, what are we going to do about Kyler Murray? Is he going to run again? What are your thoughts on the offense? Is he going to run again? Like, what are your thoughts on how that's all going to play out?
I think what we saw last year is probably a prelude of what we're going to see. I don't think he's going to be the elite running quarterback that we saw his first couple of years. Right now he's fighting for a contract extension. And what happens with running quarterbacks?
He wants to be healthy.
Tend to get hurt. Yeah, exactly. They tend to get hurt. Yeah. So,
and this is a guy.
Yeah, he is 100%. but he's a quarterback that actually completes like 60% of his pass attempts. So he doesn't need to run like a Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson because they don't complete balls at a high clip. Yeah. So, Kyler is somebody that I feel like can rely on his legs in the same way that we saw like, a younger Aaron Rodgers or what we saw like Justin Herbert do. Like they have the athletic ability so they can scramble if needed, but it's not going to be their first option. And that, I think that's the future of Kyler right now. Like, so if he's not throwing the ball for, I don't know, 4,800 yards.
Exactly.
He does not have top 6 upside to me anymore.
And I just want to quickly go back to Nate's point before I get into Joe's thing. With Hollywood Brown, even on the higher Fantasy Pros ADP, he's the wide receiver 22, right behind Chris Godwin, who I was just bitching about. You wouldn't take Marquise Brown ahead of DeAndre Hopkins. So why are you taking, or the other way around, you wouldn't take DeAndre Hopkins ahead of Marquise Brown. Why are you doing it with Chris Godwin? Get this man's ADP up. Otherwise, snakes like Nate are just going to take him from you in the draft. Yep.
Fair enough.
Joe's biggest sleeper is AJ Green, and I just love what he wrote here. He's the wide receiver 8 in ADP right now, but he is going behind Antonio Brown and Will Fuller, who don't have jobs. So maybe when AJ Green's going to play that DeAndre Hopkins role for 6 weeks, you might want him on your fantasy roster, but I guarantee you he's going to score more points than Will Fuller and Antonio Brown as of this point anyway.
Facts.
And his IDP stash is actually a stash this time around. It is Marcus Golden, and he prefaces that this needs to be a sack-heavy league. And my favorite thing that he wrote is they're going to play Seattle twice. So at the very least, if you need to plug in a guy for 2 weeks while he plays Seattle, Marcus Golden's going to rack up some scores there for you.
Love it.
And finally, Nate's Dallas Cowboys, 12-5 last year. Same coaching staff, Mike McCarthy, Kellen Moore running the offense. Player with the most upside. Josh has Ezekiel Elliott. I have Dalton Schultz, and if you guys don't talk enough about Dalton Schultz, I will definitely.
Well, I didn't want to steal your thunder on Schultz. So that's why I went Zeke, because I like his upside because people are just fading him because they have this love affair with Tony Pollard that I just don't understand. But continue.
And then biggest trap, Josh has now already let you know. We both have it as Tony Pollard, and there is a love affair with Tony Pollard right now. So that may come up as well. So Nate, there's one Cowboy you have to leave your draft with. It is.
I mean, I agree with Josh. It's Zeke Elliott.
Okay.
And I'm just gonna lay out a stat for you. Okay, it's just the facts with this one. For some reason, like everyone loves to hate Zeke. Like all of a sudden, they want to pretend like he's bad when he's anything but that. Here are his RB finishes in PPR since entering the league in 2016. You ready? So 2016 RB2. 2017, RB12 in just 10
and
games.
And he played 10 games.
In 2018, RB5. 2019, RB3. 2020, RB9. 2021, RB7. And he played through a partially torn PCL.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and he was bad last year. Let's not forget that.
he was bad, and he finished as the RB7.
Right?
Okay, give me that guy. So, and guess what his ADP is this year? And guess what? I just looked it up while you guys were chatting on Fantasy Pros.
Oh, he has the real data.
18.
Oh my God.
What are we doing? He never finished worse than the RB12 when he played just 10 games in his second year in the league, and we want to just write him off like he's nothing. He's the biggest value. And it might sound like, my fan is coming out of me, but he is the biggest value in the draft this year. So give me Zeke Elliott on every single team. Actually, in Scott Fishbowl, I started with Russell Wilson, Najee Harris, Nick Chubb. My next player could have been Zeke Elliott, but I decided to go wide receiver, and I regret that after I looked up that stuff. So it's like, it's awful. Actually, Dalvin Cook, I didn't even mention it's Najee, Dalvin, Chubb, and then I could have gone Zeke.
Oh, so you would have had.
But I went Michael Pittman to pay back the guy who sniped Matt Ryan for me.
So Dan Sky chipes in here, and so Josh, I'll let you address this because you're on Zeke, you're down on Pollard. People are afraid of him sniping too many carries. I don't necessarily see this happening. I think it's pass plays where you're going to need to worry about Pollard. but Zeke is a 1,000-yard running back, and he's going to score the touchdowns. Josh, do you have anything to just talk about Zeke or to talk bad about Tony Pollard?
Dan's my cousin, hi, Dan.
Okay.
Thanks for that.
I mean, the last 2 years, Pollard's been at 101 carries and 130 carries. Like, that's great. So, he's trending up, but Zeke is still a 200-plus carry running back. Like, really what this tells me is that this is literally a two-back system. It's Zeke and it's Pollard. That's it. Like, they've been healthy enough to where they can handle the load themselves. Now, if one of these guys gets hurt, obviously that changes.
Obviously.
Maybe that is Zeke. I don't know. Maybe he started his decline last year with these injuries. I'm not willing to bet on that because he's been that consistently good throughout his career. And I just, again, I get the electricity. You know, he averaged 5.5 yards per carry. That's fine. He's not a touchdown guy. No. So I don't care. He can have 150 carries all he wants and average 5 yards a carry. If he's not getting in the end zone, he doesn't do anything for me in fantasy.
But people, here's the thing with Tony Pollard, right? And everyone makes this same mistake. Same thing with Chase Edmonds, right? We talked about him earlier. It's those running backs who get sprinkled in, right, amongst a full-time running back, and they get sprinkled in, and they have fresh legs. They go in, run 5.5 yards, 6 yards,
100%.
7 yards, and then they go back and sit their ass down while the starter Zeke Elliott comes back in huffing and puffing because he's been in the entire game. So all of a sudden it's like, oh, obviously you give Tony Pollard all those carries and he's going to continue on this 5.5 yards per carry path. And that's just not how football works. It's not how physics work. That's not how
you can't project that over 300 carries.
You cannot do that. He's just someone with fresh legs who gets to spend some time on the sidelines and can breathe for more than half the game and come in and make a run like that and go sit back down while Zeke is in there the entire time. So this is the problem with, wanting the new shiny toy all the time.
Yeah.
I love Tony Pollard. Don't get me wrong. He's a Cowboy. He's very good. He is exciting. Yeah. But it's because he has all that time to breathe and relax and come in fresh every time he touches the ball.
And Dan does want the world to know he's on the bounce back train with Zeke. Though I love the fact that we're worried about it being a bounce back when he was the RB7.
When he was RB7, right?
and our buddy Chris Robin thinks Tim McGraw's with us tonight. So.
and I mean, we look like Tim McGraw. I don't know what it is. I don't know. I guess whatever.
Who knows? So, but this is the other thing too that I find interesting. Like, we talk about Zeke and Pollard and Pollard potentially stealing like the passing work and the targets and everything. Like, since Pollard came into the league, these are the receiving numbers for these two guys. 82 receptions, 637 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That's Tony Pollard. 153 receptions, 1,045 yards, and 6 touchdowns. That's Zeke.
Yeah.
Jerry Jones loves Zeke Elliott. Like,
exactly.
Why doesn't anyone understand that Jerry Jones still runs his team?
Exactly.
If he says, I love Zeke, we're going to keep giving him the ball. No one wants to listen to the crazy old guy, but guess what happens? Whatever he says.
Well,
so
and
let's stop ignoring
you win
that.
fantasy football by finding value. And Nate, you hit it on the head. Is you're getting Zeke as an RB3 damn near at this point, RB18 going into the third round. And it gives you the flexibility to maybe go get a Justin Jefferson to get an early wide receiver. Or if you're someone who likes to get Travis Kelce and spend that early pick, you can now get a running back, Travis Kelce, and then get Zeke as your RB2 with the potential to finish as an RB1. Before we move on to anything, if you don't want to draft your tight end early, there is one mid-round tight end that is not a trap, and that is one Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz was the tight end 3 last year on 103 targets. I think he was 1 target behind the now in Cleveland, Amari Cooper. I think Schultz has a legitimate chance to cross 120, even 130 targets this year. I think he finishes top 5 again with absolutely no issue. You're drafting him as about the tight end 6 or 7 right now. I think he's top 5 again with no issue. And I truly believe that with age catching up with Travis Kelce and the offense catching up with Mark Andrews, I think Dalton Schultz could finish the year as the tight end 1. And before you call me crazy, I was just 1 year early on Mark Andrews finishing as the tight end 1 when I said that.
article.
So, I'm not calling you crazy, Ryan. No, yep. I'm not going to do it. I mean,
well, absolutely. And I mean, stop and think. Gallup's coming back from an injury. The guy behind him, James Washington, hasn't been really anything.
And actually, Jalen Tolbert, the rookie. And they're saying he's projected to start right now. All camp reports are that he is going to win that job. So.
Okay, cool. Still a rookie.
I know this is great for Dalton Schultz. That's what I'm getting at. Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. So, I mean, outside of Zeke or potentially Pollard, Schultz is the second target in this offense. And we've seen in, I think, the last 3 years, there's been at least 2 guys over 100 targets.
Yep.
And I think it was 3 years ago, they had 3 guys over 100 targets. Like, they're going to throw the football.
Number
and
one
Dak
yardage
Prescott,
offense
coming off of a bad leg injury, set a career high in touchdown passes last year. This offense is tailor-made for Dalton Schultz to absolutely ball in 2022.
You could take your Eagles hat off now.
Yeah.
I said I like them for fantasy. Shut up, Nate.
We'll all pour one out. We'll all pour one out for Blake Jarwin, but Dalton Schultz is the phoenix from the ashes of Blake Jarwin. Amen. Nate, is there a Cowboy you're avoiding? I know this is your favorite team, but with cost baked in, is there a Cowboy you're avoiding?
And this one pains me to say too, and it's gonna surprise everybody. It's CeeDee Lamb.
Ooh.
Like, I hate to say it, right? But after looking at, like, sometimes you just can't ignore the numbers. As much as you want to build something up in your head, like, he's going to crush it. Because I was like, he's going to be a top 10 wide receiver last year, okay? Yeah. I was, like, on that train where he was going to, eclipse and take over Amari Cooper as a wide receiver 1. Obviously, they got rid of Amari Cooper, and they're really, relying on him. However, Dak Prescott, as good as he is for fantasy football, he has supported a top 20 fantasy football wide receiver just 3 times in his career, okay? 2018, Amari Cooper was the wide receiver 19. So we're splitting hairs on the wide receiver 20. It's right there. 2019, Amari Cooper was the wide receiver 10. 2021, last year, CeeDee Lamb was the wide receiver 19, okay? Now, Amari Cooper's wide receiver 15 finished in 2020, in case anybody's wondering. Dak only played the 5 games. That's when he went down and got hurt, right? So that was all like Andy Dalton. So Dak loves to spread the ball around, right? And he's got plenty of weapons. He made Michael Gallup relevant in a world when he had CeeDee Lamb, Dalton Schultz, and Amari Cooper to target. He made Michael Gallup somebody, right? He's got James Washington, Dalton Schultz, as you said, Ryan, and a pair of running backs that can both catch the ball. So I think CeeDee Lamb, I think people are reaching on him a bit, and it pains me to say, because obviously, of course, I want to be wrong as hell on this.
Yeah,
I want to be super wrong, but the data just does not support it in this situation.
And that's fair. And I'll openly admit, Josh, I know, has similar feelings to you. I am in someone who is probably too high on CeeDee Lamb. When I last did my projections, he actually jumped all the way up to wide receiver 4, I think, at this point. So yeah. I would love to see it happen. I'm probably too high, and it's probably something I need to go look back at, because he was the one last year and didn't do it. So why has that changed this year? Josh, do you have anything to add on
Lamb? Wide receiver 19 last year.
Yep. Josh, do you have anything to add on Lamb? Because I know you have similar thoughts based on previous conversations we've had.
Yeah, I mean, I love CeeDee Lamb. What's always gotten me with Lamb is how the dynasty community has basically made him a top 5 guy, and he hasn't shown to be that yet.
Well, ever since that damn Jerry Rice player comp came out,
I'm saying player profiler, like, just set the ball rolling, and it's just snowballed. Like,
he's wearing the 88, Josh. That's what it is.
Yeah,
it's the
like
88.
I love CeeDee Lamb. I really do. Like, I loved him at Oklahoma. I was irate when the Eagles could not trade up to draft him. Like, irate, because I love CeeDee Lamb. And it pains me to want to root for him because he's wearing 88 for a wrong team.
No. 88 should have been retired with the Cowboys. I gotta say that. That should have been
Michael
Irvin
a
long time ago. Love
that guy. Yeah. Go Miami. Go you. Anyway. But like, even Dez, like, we crowned Dez, and for he had like 3 seasons where he was really good, but outside of that, he wasn't.
Dak stopped targeting him. I'm a Dez truther. I love Dez.
Yeah, I love Dez too. I think he's a great
Dak.
I'm so excited that he's in fantasy football this year. But
Dak doesn't trust anybody with a 50-50 ball. Even somebody like Dez, where 80% of the time he's coming down with it. He never did that. So if he was covered, he wasn't looking at Dez, and that was his decline.
Yeah. I'm curious to see how that, because I just feel like Dak is more willing to spread the ball around. It's kind of similar to Baker in Cleveland. Like they tried to force a wide receiver one on him, and that's what just kind of derailed his career there and OBJ's career for all intents and purposes. Like this isn't something like Dak is not going to force the ball to you.
Right.
He had to in like the first, that first half a season that Amari was there because they just didn't have anybody. But Gallup showed that he could be a good receiver, but he's not a wide receiver one. He's a good complement. And if you throw the ball enough, those types of players are going to put up stats. It's the same reason why Alvin Harper was even talked about opposite Michael Irvin, because it was a high passing volume offense.
Yep.
And he got work.
Everyone had to focus on Irvin.
Exactly. So now you've got Gallup coming back. You've got, Tolbert kind of starting in this role. Obviously, Gallup is still going to be there. They gave him the extension for a reason. But This is going to be CeeDee's chance to shine. And I want to believe in him. Believe me, I really do. It's the same reason why I want to believe that A.J. Brown is going to transcend this passing offense for the Eagles.
Right.
But I just don't know that they're going to throw the ball enough. And I don't know that Dak is going to zero in on Lamb to the point where he's 150, 155 target guy and catches 10-plus touchdowns. I just don't know that.
I like it. Nate, who are you gambling on? Who's going to outplay their ADP and be the best asset when it comes to the odds?
Perfect segue. Michael Gallup.
Okay.
Right? So prior to his injured season last year in 2020, Gallup, he totaled 800 receiving yards, over 800 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns, with most of that coming from Andy Dalton. As I mentioned, that was the year that Dak went down, right? So that's with Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Dalton Schultz. So in 2019, Gallup had over 1,100 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns with Amari Cooper out of the picture. Gallup should see a major increase in involvement in the offense this year, right? And the thing is, you can draft him at the end of the 9th round. Yeah, what I had was wide receiver 43. What do you guys see?
I haven't looked.
Fantasy Pros has them a lot later than that.
So wide receiver 43 and
50.
So okay,
50 on Fantasy
right?
Pros.
So, and to me,
at like 120 overall. So I mean, 10-team league, that's 12th round.
If you're looking for late round value, he's gonna give you that return on investment. There's no without Amari Cooper there, that target share gets spread apart. And Michael Gallup's now healthy. He's back, and he was already heavily involved the last 2 seasons prior to that injured season, and now he's the number 2 on the team. So give me Michael Gallup, man.
I guess my biggest question, Nate, would be how are we worried at all about him coming back from the ACL?
Well, of course, you're always worried about things like that. But I mean, and not to say that the Cowboys are incapable of making poor decisions on personnel, but they just gave him an extension, right?
Yeah.
They let Amari go. I think if they really thought there was going to be an issue,
they put their eggs in his basket because they trusted his recovery. They trusted his process. They think he looks good enough where he's going to be that guy, and they gave him the extension. So I think that's kind of what backs it up a little bit for me to really trust that. And again, we're talking about the 9th round guys. Like, if he doesn't work out for you, you drop him. Okay. It's just when we get to that point, do we really want to argue that much about a guy going so late when that's what we're talking about? Someone that's going to return the value on ADP. There's just too many signs pointing toward the fact that he's going to give you much higher than what his ADP reflects right now.
There you go. And you want it goes back to what we've been saying. The Dallas Cowboy offense had the most yards in the NFL last year. They were the number 1 rated offense. You want a part of this offense, and Gallup, if he is healthy, is your cheapest entry point to this offense. He's going after Pollard, obviously after the big starters, even after Dalton Schultz, who you should get. Everybody has their different opinions on the wide receivers. Joe, as his sleeper, put James Washington, that he finally has an arm that can throw the ball deep. And I think this was honestly just Joe's way of making fun of Ben Roethlisberger again. James Washington was a player I liked until Gallup started looking a lot healthy, and they drafted Jalen Tolbert. But James Washington is Joe's sleeper. His IDP stash is not a stash. He's the second IDP off the board.
Correct.
Most times.
So I like that pick, though, because that's what I was going to say. If you wanted to go super deep, James Washington is free. Get him with your last pick in the draft. And James Washington, he can be in the slot. And, I mean, there's been speculation that he's a very good fit for this offense. And you just don't know until somebody switches teams. He's somebody worth the risk on your last pick.
I completely agree. And like I said, I liked him a lot. Tolbert is getting way more hype than Washington right now. So it's going to be interesting. If Gallup, if they can all play, is Washington only in on 4 wide receiver sets, but the Cowboys could run plenty of 4 wide receiver sets as well. So it's not anything to be worried about. Joe's IDP stash is Micah Parsons, who is the second IDP off the board. Not much of a stash.
I just love his reasoning more than anything.
Yeah, so he hates stating the obvious. Yeah, he hates stating the obvious, but outside of Micah Parsons, the defense is awful. So unless you're playing, unless you're playing in a well, a lot of people are going to want to take, like, if you're in a league where you draft corners or DBs rather, they're going to want to take Trevon Diggs, but you're replicating what Diggs did last year is super hard, and he still was only like the cornerback 7 or cornerback 11.
He was the best corner and the worst corner.
Well, yeah, that's for
really
real
what
football.
He was.
That's for real football. I'm talking for IDP. He barely even cracked the top 10 with one of the most interesting seasons ever. Because in IDP, you don't lose points when someone gets beat. You just get points for all the great stuff they do. And Diggs did a lot of great stuff. It's unlikely he's going to be able to repeat that. So I agree with Micah Parsons. Do not get me wrong, but he's not a stash. You could try a little harder next time, Joe.
Yeah, Joe.
Joe. Guys, we did it. We made it to the end of the show. I cannot thank you enough, Nate. Last minute guest. You couldn't have asked for anything better. Right. I love talking football with Nate, mainly because we think similarly, but even when we disagree, we're really nice about it. We don't have to be dicks to each other about it. Right. But Nate, please tell everybody about your journey. Tell them what you're doing right now and where you're doing it.
Sure. Right now I'm editing for gambling.com, an amazing company. They have full-time, full benefits, the whole 9. I love it, man. I'm finally in. So when I have sports up on my monitor and my wife walks in, I'm telling her I'm working.
You're working.
And that's the dream, right? That's the dream. So
absolutely.
So right now, as I'm focusing on my editing role and I want to get that underway, I'm going to be a little slow on content heading into the season, but I'm already in the Fantasy Football Black Book, which you can go out on Amazon. I have a feature article in Bob Harris's Football Diehards draft book that you can find in Barnes & Nobles or gas stations, wherever all the magazines are. So I've got a 2-page article on that as well. And yeah, man, if you follow me on Twitter @DominateFF, if you want to follow my content, I post everything there. So thank you guys for having me.
One of my favorite things about Nate, not that I haven't been talking Nate up the entire show, but even as Nate's follower account got bigger and bigger, Nate always interacts with people who ask him questions. And even the people who give him shit, you'll clap back at them. And we just had Michelle Majuk on the show last week, Josh. Yeah, last week.
Love.
And she's kind of been the same way. I know you and Michelle are very close.
Yes.
And she's been the same way where she interacts with people who ask questions. And if you give her shit, she's going to give it right back to you. But the great thing about Nate and Michelle is they can always back up their points. They don't say the shit they say without having the evidence. So if you come at the king, don't miss is basically what I'm trying to say.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. So make sure you're following Nate. Look Inside series is coming to an end. We're actually pushing closer to the end, but it's in full swing right now. And what we've done with these on our website is we've actually done player spotlight articles to go along with every team. So if my math is correct, I think we just crossed 23 player spotlight articles on clubfantasyffl.com. Today, we just dropped Rondale Moore. Earlier this week, Josh gave us a great Josh Jacobs article. And then last week, we always line them up with the 3 teams that we cover. So we have articles on Najee Harris, how he could be the RB1 potentially.
Yes.
Jacoby Myers, Faith's once a year article. She's the Haley's Comment of fantasy football writers. And then I'm lost where I was here. Devonta Smith. That was by Drew, if I remember correctly. So a lot of great articles on the site. And if you go find one of them, there's links to all of them because I try to keep it as simple for you. And we like it when we see clicks on our website. So go check those articles out. I think you're really going to enjoy them. Don't forget, every Monday morning, I host a mock draft show, Mock It Like It's Hot, here on the channel, live on YouTube. We send out the link to draft with us about 9 o'clock in the morning. The show starts at 11. Last week, we incorporated some IDP. We had Nate Cheatham, the founder of IDP Guys. This week, we're going right back to redraft, but in honor of Scott Fish, I'm adding a third round reversal just to show how that kind of can affect your draft strategy and your draft slot choice. And we're sticking with IDP Guys. We're going to have Brandon Haye, who I believe has actually been on this show, or he's been on at least a few of our shows, and he is going to be on the mock draft.
Yeah,
show
he was on our Tight End Stars of Tomorrow series.
Yep. And then next week, we transition from one amazing guest to a very, very amazing guest. No offense, Nate, but you'll understand here.
That's okay.
Joe is back, but the show will not be live. And that is because through the miracle of email and knowing the right people, we have the one and only Stefania Bell of the 0601
06010 podcast.
Sorry, I'm nervous about announcing Stefania Bell.
No kidding.
I was emailing Stefania Bell this week, so we're besties, and I can't wait to talk to her. We're going to be covering the Buffalo Bills, the Tennessee Titans, and the Tampa Bay Bucks. So make sure you are subscribed to our YouTube page. We will not be live, but the show will go live at 7 o'clock. We're going to pre-record this because why the hell wouldn't we if it means we get to talk to Stefania Bell? And that's the show. Josh, you have anything you want to add for anything?
I have one big announcement because we are now 4 weeks away from our third annual Women of Fantasy Football series. I wanted to start slowly rolling out what the raffles will be. So if you're unfamiliar or just, tuning into us for the first time, what we do is we raffle off signed memorabilia and we raise money to support the advancement of women in sports. This year, we are partnering with NFL on Fox reporter Laura Oakman and her organization Galvanize to create a Women of Fantasy Football Galvanize Scholarship, which will help fund the participation of X number of women into the boot camps that Galvanize organizes with different sports franchises across the country, across all 4 major sports.
Wow.
Ideally, we're going to focus on the football side of things, obviously, since it's Women of Fantasy Football. And this year, she's done boot camps with the Atlanta Falcons. She did a boot camp with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And she also did a boot camp with Nate, your Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah.
She will be doing her 4th and final NFL boot camp here, I believe, next week with the Los Angeles Chargers. So next year, we will have the opportunity to basically give, I don't know, however many women the opportunity to attend these boot camps on a
depends on how much of your money you give.
Depends on how much money you guys are willing to give us in terms of these raffles. So that being said, I spent a good amount of money this year to make sure that we get the best of the best jerseys that you guys want to buy raffle tickets for. These tickets are $5. You can buy as many as you like, and 100% of the proceeds will go towards this scholarship fund that we're setting up with Galvanize. So in honor of the fact that we talked about the Arizona Cardinals and the Dallas Cowboys, I would like to say that we will be raffling off a signed Larry Fitzgerald Cardinals jersey. And you're going to love this one, Nate.
Yeah,
a signed Emmitt Smith Cowboys jersey.
I literally
the NFL's all-time leading wide receiver.
Let me just. I literally bumped into Emmitt Smith in Las Vegas a few years ago with my wife. I bumped into him and I just turned and he kind of looked back at me. I looked at him and then I started walking and I was like, man, that guy, dude, looks so familiar. I was like, Gina, I think that was Emmitt Smith. Gina's my wife. She's like, there's no way, blah, blah, blah. So I look up him on social and stuff. Sure enough, he's in Vegas, and it was at the Lefter Hotel where I literally bumped into him, and I never said anything to him. It was that's crazy fantastic. Story. So, that's fantastic. Anyways, carry on with your awesome stuff that you're doing over there, Josh.
Yes. But yes, so we ran a poll on Twitter. We wanted to kind of see what the audience wanted. Last year, we did basically just kind of the current stars of the NFL. We raised a little over $2,300 last year. This year, my goal, I want to cross $3,000. That's my big goal. And I feel like we have the jerseys that can bring that to fruition. And we have a great partner in Laura and Galvanize, and hopefully, more people see it than last year. And that's really the biggest thing. So,
and when do the raffles
really
start again, Josh?
They will be, so when our last show airs, a Look Inside show airs on August 3rd, the first round of raffles will go live immediately after the show airs.
Okay.
It will be open for 7 days, and it will close on the day of the first Women of Fantasy show, which will air on August 10th.
Wow.
There you go.
So we'll do two jerseys every single week. We'll have 4 weeks of Women of Fantasy. So it's raised a lot of money for a really good cause, guys.
So you can follow us at Club Fantasy FFL on Twitter, and you can follow the Women of Fantasy account at, I believe it's women_of_FF. So you'll get all the information from those two accounts. I'm sure it's down in the description. If not, it will be after the show airs. So make sure you're looking for those things. Make sure you're following us. Those raffles are going to start in about, 3 weeks now. You want to be a part of this, not just because you can win awesome merch. You are helping, move women along in this industry. And my goodness, we can all do better when it comes to that. And Laura Oakman's fighting on the front lines. Let's make sure we're supporting these people. So, speaking of Women of Fantasy, make sure you tune in next week as we cover the Bills, the Titans, and the Buccaneers with the one and only Stefania Bell. Always remember, defense wins championships, offense wins fantasy. I got it right. I hope you're proud of me, Joe. Have a great night, everybody.